Good morning to all, and good afternoon to everyone also. It is with great pleasure. My name is Anthony Roser. I am the Director of Human Rights and Diversity Commission. The Human Rights and Diversity Commission is in conjunction with Teamsters History Project, welcomes the next segment of our monthly history program based on Teamsters and labor movement within diversity within the union. This class today that we will have is called History Repeats Itself. It will be presented by Carlos Gonzales, Local 1932, is a business agent for that local and also is the Hispanic Caucus president. We also have Abraham Gallegos from Local 1932 of the Hispanic Caucus, the vice president, and also does some political stuff with the local. And last but not least, Anabel Palazuelos. And I pronounced it probably wrong, but I love these people. She's Thank you. She's from Local 1932 also. These three people, I love them dearly. They have done a lot of stuff to give us a lot of history with the Hispanics. And I'd like to introduce them and thank you for your time and taking this time out to spend it with them again. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having us. Thank you for HRDC for all that you guys do as well. Appreciate you having us back here to do this presentation. I also want to introduce Tony Soto over here to my left, who's also part of the Hispanic Caucus. He's here with us as well. So with that, I just kind of want to get started a little bit. The head deported then and targeted now, just kind of a reflection of history kind of repeating itself. So with that, we'll just dive right into it. So why we're here is remembering, reflecting, and rising together. So even though we're dealing with certain things within our country today that affects us as Latinos, Hispanics, I believe there's hope, and because we know the playbook. And we're going to get into that as far as knowing the playbook. And I know that as Teamsters, rising together is what we've been doing since 1903. And why it's important to be a Teamster, I think because we've always set the tone in regards to social justice, because our contracts that represent over 1.3 million members are colorblind. They don't know where you're from, don't know your background. All they know is when you go to work, you're a Teamster. And we take extreme pride in that, and we're going to continue to take extreme pride in that. And that's why our organization, along with HRDC, is spearheading a lot of this stuff so we can educate our members, not only on things that probably aren't taught in school, but so they can understand the history of it. So when they see it today, we'll understand the playbook and know how to react towards it.
We levies so-called Mexican law through this country illegally. The number is increasing. Some days as many as 5,000 are caught and sent back in a single day.
So that's a clip that's, I believe, from the 1950s that you heard earlier. So it wasn't from any time today. So we just want to take the time and playing that, obviously when that happened in the past, we honor the families that were torn apart and connect their story to us rising together as defenders of every worker, and not just every worker, but just every member in our community that's a working individual.
So we'll get started with the first Bracero program. Before 1917, at the border from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, to El Paso, thousands of people, thousands of Mexicans cross that border every single day without a passport to go to work. American farm owners love that. Other corporations love that because labor was cheaper. And because there wasn't a lot of laws, there wasn't any really laws to govern how these workers were being treated. So the US embraced that system. Mexicans came every single day and went back home. In 1917, that changed. The Mexican Revolution was still going on. The US was about to enter World War I. There was war hysteria everywhere. The US was afraid that the Germans were going to attack through Ciudad Juarez and come into Texas. There was also the eugenics movement going on, which is a whole nother story. But the eugenics movement, the goal to that was to create a pure and clean generation. And that actually caused a lot of stricter controls in immigration. So during that time, because of all this, the eugenics movement, World War I happening, and we're going into the war, orders to have Border Patrol weed out what they called unfit were very heavy. The narratives began as the whole dirty Mexican narrative began. The narrative of Mexicans being the inferior race was born from that. So back then, the mayor, his name was Mayor Lee of El Paso, was obsessed with cleanliness. And it wasn't just physical cleanliness, but it was racial cleanliness. He led a campaign, and that campaign was called the Sanitary Betterment Campaign. And under this campaign, he sent inspectors to homes to check for lice. And what homes do you think those were? Those were Mexican homes. So these inspectors would go to these homes, they check for lice. He got really obsessed with the fear of typhus, which was a disease that was brought on by lice. So these inspectors would go in, and if they found lice in those homes, they would make those residents bathe in kerosene baths. Everybody and anybody in the home. Not only that, but they would make them shave their heads, shave body hair. They would burn their clothes. And eventually, a lot of those homes ended up being burned down. You can imagine these people are being bathed in kerosene and everything's being burned around them. Not only was that happening in homes, but that practice went on into the jails. So in a prison out in El Paso, the prisoners were ordered to strip naked and bathe in kerosene. So a lot of these guards that were in charge of that, I mean, obviously there was no dignity there. There was no respect for any of the prisoners. And one night when the prisoners were taking their kerosene baths, one of the guards decided to light a match. And after he lit that match, 27 prisoners burned to their deaths. The newspapers back then called it the jail Holocaust. So that was pretty intense, right? Because obviously there's 27 deaths. It was huge, huge loss. All these things were happening in these people's homes. But you think that would be enough for somebody to stop this, somebody to say, hey, this isn't okay, or even the mayor, right, to realize maybe this has gone a little too far. Nope. He decided to double down. He actually sent a telegram to the general surgeon at the time in DC. And I'll read you a piece of that. So to the Surgeon General, hundreds of dirty, lousy, destitute Mexicans arriving at El Paso daily will undoubtedly bring and spread typhus unless a quarantine is placed at once. Although there was no major quarantine that started from that telegram, they began the delousing at the borders. So when people would go in, when Mexicans would come in across the border, men would go one way, women would go the other. Everybody was forced to strip naked and have their bodies inspected. These inspections happened kind of like how people would inspect livestock in a very inhumane way. If lice was found, or if inspectors found it necessary, they made these people take kerosene baths. The women faced a lot of sexual humiliation as well. There was photos that were being taken of these women. Not only was that happening, but then those photos were then being shared with other men at bars or with the public and talked about. And these women were just absolutely humiliated and had to endure that. So after they were quarantined and cleansed, if you were the person getting cleansed, you would get a ticket, and that ticket was good for 8 days. And that ticket said, okay, this person is good for 8 days. but has to do this whole process over again 8 days after. So every 8 days, people crossing the border to work here had to go through this process. One day, January 28th, 1917, a young lady by the name of Carmelita Torres said that enough is enough. She was a 17-year-old maid, and on a trolley full of women, she decided that, again, enough was enough. She decided to, let me skip over, kind of skipped a slide there. She decided to encourage and inspire all the women on the trolley. She said, you know, enough is enough. She got them to protest that day. There's 200 women that joined her, and they protested outside. Eventually that 200 went to 2,000 people. Men created physical blockades. Police tried to stop it. They were met with bottles thrown, with, you know, people basically were rioting. Unfortunately, the arrests were made of who they called the ringleaders. Specifically, Carmelita Torres was the main ringleader. She was imprisoned. And the other ringleaders, the other agitators, as they called them, were actually publicly executed. You'd think that that would have made some other change, or, you know, caused for more uproar, but actually that made things worse. The following month, in February 1917, the Immigration Act, there was a new Immigration Act came in that the orders were that imbeciles, idiots, epileptics, people that were prone to bring diseases, which were Mexicans, according to them, and political radicals were no longer allowed to come in. So all these tactics continued. And in the 1920s, Zyklon B was actually used to disinfect the clothing at the border, which Zyklon B is an extreme toxic gas. Continued for several years, and in 1937, a German scientist actually called for the use of Zyklon B during the Nazi concentration era, actually citing the El Paso delousing gas chambers. So the Nazis actually took on our practices into these concentration camps, eventually murdering millions of people with using this concentrated doses of Zyklon B. So we come to 1942, there was a new labor agreement. The new Bracero Program was in place and continued to be reinstated over and over again, and the border disinfections continued. At this point, Mexicans were sprayed in the face and in their body parts with pesticide, and the pesticide was called DDT, an extremely toxic pesticide that was actually banned in several countries. And then again, this continued for several years, finally coming to an end in 1964, where bath and fumigations were finally discontinued when the US realized, hey, this isn't a good thing, we need to discontinue.
So what led to this was economic scapegoating. So what's happening between 1929 to 1939 is the US hits the Great Depression era and jobs are scarce. So the first person they seek to remove are immigrants, Latinos, people of color that they feel are taking US jobs. The goal was obviously to address the unemployment by removing these individuals. An estimated 1.8 million people of Mexican descent were removed from the workforce. So imagine being removed based on just the color of your skin, what you look like, maybe the accent of your voice, those different things, or your cultural background. So, and that's obviously what's happening today, but just kind of think about that, like the people that we sit next to in the lunchroom, the members we represent could be here one day, gone the next. And part of that is us not knowing where they went, you know, hoping that they were deported, but then we're starting to think these things. And it's much like it is today, the economic scapegoat of why we're in this situation, why there aren't jobs, and just using individuals to say, the government saying, well, the reason this is happening is due to these people being here, these bad people that are here. And Herbert Hoover, was depicted in that photo, was the president that initiated that program. Now, he also initiated the Mexican repatriation program. So in that, they called it the repatriation program because they wanted it to sound like it was a voluntary program, but it wasn't. It was something that was happening to people of color. And here's the interesting part about that is over 60% of the people were US born. So they got picked up and sent to a country that they had no connection with, none whatsoever. And we think about our dreamers that applied during the Dream Act, and that was part of the issue is they came over here at a young age, but this is the only country they know. And here you're having your government telling you, because you don't look a certain way and you look like people from this region, you are not American, when over 60% of those people were. So, we have to ask ourselves, what makes us an American? And the even sadder part about that is there was a lot of Latinos that fought during World War I. So we fought wars in this country, we actually fought in the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and those things aren't talked about throughout history. And yet they're saying, okay, well, you look a certain way, we got to send you back because you're not part of this country. And the reason they were here to begin with was because they needed somebody to tend to the fields during World War I. So they said, hey, welcome. We want you to come here to this country, work our fields, because the men are off to war. And we're going to stay here, but now we don't need you anymore because we're going through economic struggles that actually happen because the rich created those economic struggles. And now they're saying, okay, let's blame these immigrants for coming here, and they're the reason for the problem. So let's get rid of them so we can create jobs for what they deemed as real Americans, when over 60% of them were real Americans. They just didn't look Anglo or what they thought an American should look like.
Of course, all this, they create these policies, they issue these demands, and the realization of a human cost isn't really there to them, right? It's there to us and to our community. The families that were separated during this, going to work, not coming home. Today, we're at least blessed with cell phones, and telephones to give calls, or the ability to give a call. Back then, they didn't have that. Many were rushed out of their home with whatever belongings they could carry. They really lost everything. Think of owning a home, owning a business, anything you can think of, set generations back. But it created also more of an era where it was okay to just say, you know what, you're Mexican, you don't belong here, right? You don't get to swim in our pools. You don't get to go to our libraries. You don't, and it's not just Mexicans. So it was people of color, anybody who didn't fit a mold or their vision of what is an American. So those voices were erased. A lot of people were told they don't belong here. Again, this human toll aspect of it was really just created to instill fear in our people, right? We start to separate from each other. We're Mexican American, we're Chicano, we're Latino. All these terms started to turn around. I'm not undocumented. I'm not an illegal. We don't resonate with it in our own culture anymore. It created that divide amongst ourselves. Many were afraid to speak their own languages. And, you go into a library, you're speaking English or the best English that you can for fear, you slip up and you say a Spanish word, you get deported out. Families were not allowed to speak Spanish at home anymore. And that takes away from our culture and our heritage. And the hypocrisy behind all of it, right? At the end of the day, they realize, hey, nobody's doing this work. We pushed everybody out. Now we need everybody back in. Or we need to set a system to bring people back in. But we need to create this agency that goes out and regularly checks on people to make sure that they're here legally. And if they're not, we're taking them away. This picture will show a field worker showing his immigration paperwork to an officer so he knows that he's here legally. We're good enough to build your houses, we're good enough to work in the warehouses, we're good enough to put food on the table, but we weren't good enough for just human dignity. And that's really where a lot of our message is going to come from today, and hope it resonates with our membership, because we all do deserve equal rights. This isn't just a class warfare, this is a human rights issue.
The Republican platform promises to launch the largest deportation operation in the history of our country. Even larger than that of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Did you like Dwight Eisenhower as president at all? Well, I wasn't around during President Eisenhower's. He's a fair man. He did this. Brave American. Yeah, he did this with over 1 million people. He did it, and it was actually very successfully done. And Americans play a role.
So those were clips, obviously, from our current president. The last one was Dwight D. Eisenhower. And this was, President Trump is referring to Operation Wetback. So just kind of think that that's what the US government called it, Operation Wetback, which obviously is a derogatory term used to describe somebody from south of the border, or actually it's used to describe anybody from any Latin country, Greece, or they use all these different terms, and wetback was a common term back then. And look at it now. I mean, they don't say Operation Wetback, but it's just as bad, because they say criminals, rapists, and drug dealers. And when you say those things, people don't look at you, and you don't wear a sign that says I'm a criminal, I'm a rapist, I'm a murderer or drug dealer. When you refer to people of Latin descent as those things, the people that don't understand where you're coming from, or your culture, or how you've helped build this country or served this country in the military, they look at you as those things, especially if it's said by an individual like our president. So Operation Wetback, obviously derogatory. It was a federal mass deportation, which began in 1954 under the Eisenhower administration, and it targeted Mexicans and immigrants. What's interesting about that is, during that time, the head of the Border Patrol was an individual by the name of Harlan B. Carter. He was actually a convicted murderer. He killed a Latino teenager in 1931. He was also the head of the NRA. He convinced Eisenhower to ramp up immigration efforts because he was a well-known racist, and didn't like Mexicans, as he said, those quote from him. So he wanted them all gone. In 1953, Carter tried to get the National Guard involved in this deportation. This is going to be interesting. Since the US military is not supposed to be used to enforce domestic laws, he wasn't given authorization. Obviously, now we see today that is a huge hot topic issue, because they are using the military, not only just to what they call create national law, or enforce national laws, or deportation. During Operation Wetback, tens of thousands of immigrants were shoved into buses, boats, and planes and sent to unfamiliar parts of Mexico. In Chicago, 3 planes a week were filled with immigrants and flown to Texas. 25% of all the immigrants deported were crammed onto boats, later compared to slave ships, while others died of sunstroke, disease, and other causes while in custody. So we're talking about the 1950s. But if I didn't mention that, many people would think I would be talking about today and what we're experiencing as a country in this situation. And even now, like, you think about it, you know, we're having this conversation prior to getting on this, and it's Sunday, and a lot of us are going to get off this and watch football. I feel like every time I sit down and watch, whether it's baseball or football or whatever I'm watching, a sports that millions of Americans watch, I have to watch a commercial from the head of the Department of Immigration, and it's talking about these criminals, murderers, rapists, drug dealers, and they show these photos of individuals, and I don't see that. And I think, you know, if you have tattoos, you're considered MS-13 if you're brown. Me, I was just like, well, these guys look like Teamsters to me. You know, they don't look any different than my neighbors. They don't look any different than my relatives. They don't look any different than a lot of the brothers and sisters on this call. So if you want to see who they're going after, just take a look in the mirror because that's who they're targeting. They're targeting individuals that look like you and I. And even if you don't look like you and I, if you're a person that supports fighting against this injustice, they're figuring out ways to come after you as well. If you're at a protest, people have been arrested and locked up
Sorry.
and being locked up. So I think that that's important. And again, us as an organization, us as Teamsters and the HRDC and what they do is to educate people on these certain things that are happening because I'm a firm believer in that when you know your history, it guides you down these rabbit holes to find out more and how you see these injustices, you want to correct them. And the best way for us as Teamsters to do that is always on the shop floor. It's the most powerful, impactful way to create justice. You know, employers, when you're organizing new workers and it's a location where there's immigrants or people of color, the first thing they say is, oh, you're going to get deported if you join the union. And we obviously know that's not true, but they use it as fear. Now that ramps up even more. But when they become Teamsters, there's no greater social justice than standing up to your employer. There's no greater social justice than saying this is what we want in our contract. There's no greatest social justice than winning those daily fights on that shop floor because that's where you have the least amount of your rights if you're not part of a great organization like our union, like the Teamsters Union. You don't have any rights. They tell us we have rights as Americans, and we do, but if you don't exercise those rights, then you don't have any. What we're fighting with now, outside of the shop floor, is making sure the rights that we do have as Americans, that we enforce them in the ways that it was intended to be enforced, not construed into these laws of hatred and divisiveness.
Here we see a picture of people that are rounded outside of a factory, right? Again, this is more than just this is more of a human rights issue, but again, this is a Teamster issue because you know this is who we as Teamsters protect. And these, like Carlos just said, these are our members out on these floors who are worried about it. We have organizing drives like Carlos just referenced, you know, people will drop out and say, no, I don't want immigration here. Look at how bad they're going. Now they don't even need, back then, if you couldn't produce paperwork, you were on the spot deported. It's the same kind of issues that we're dealing with today and the same fear that we're dealing with today. Somebody may be here with a legal permanent residency, but will be feared that, you know, if I can't produce it or I'll get thrown out for unionizing or for exercising my rights, I don't have rights. And that's kind of what we're hearing, as Carlos again referenced in the commercials that we see, right? We're getting rid of all these people. We don't want them here. But again, these people are the ones that are this is us. We are those people. That Operation Wetback led to the ability for a stronger border control, right? People demanded, hey, let's have some human rights, some human dignity. And it seems like every time we take a step forward, they take a giant jump and leap and try to do something completely different. And we saw that when the kids were being put in cages, right? Yeah, we now took a step and said, all right, we've got to have some kind of consistency, some kind of laws to protect our migrant workers. We got them the right to organize, but only in the state of California and New York. Agricultural workers are still treated like slaves in other states because they have no rights and they're not part of the NLRA. We see that when we try to organize cannabis workers in other states and agriculture. You know, employers are like, hey, they don't have rights. They don't belong in the system. If you're in the fields, if you're in cannabis and onions and garlic, whatever it is that you're working on, you have a right. You're a human being. And for us to take that away from people is ridiculous as humans. And that's why it's very important to be part of this labor movement, for us to change that dynamic and give those rights to people. These are the fears that they had then. fears that they have today, right? Family separation, wage theft, retaliation for organizing and mobilizing. We see that when we go out to a rally, we see the brutality that happens. When I go to a rally, when I've gone out to protest, I don't go out there with my pepper gun. I don't go out there to cause violence. I go out there peacefully and to show force and solidarity. We're met with resistance and we're pushed back and told we can't voice it out. A lot of employers use the tactic of in agriculture for wage theft, and we're seeing that today, still to this day. They go out, they pick a big harvest, and then they call immigration on their own employees so they don't have to do payroll. That's ridiculous. Or hey, guess what? You're not getting paid. You don't like it? Too bad. Go back home. Maybe come back next week and I'll give you another job, another opportunity to get a check, but you're not getting it this week. And ICE are going straight to, just like they did back then in that other picture, they're going to the fields, they're going to construction sites. I mean, I don't know, Carlos, I don't see any rapists up there. I don't see, you know, any drug dealers up there, right? I see us working as people and trying to make a living and provide for our family. And this is where we're met at, right? We're met at the workforce, having lunch, being pulled off job sites and checked for documentation.
Just kind of, you know, piggyback off what Abe was saying, you know, you hear this fear and there's people to blame and everyone. When I hear people talk about the Obama administration and they say, well, Obama deported more people than President Trump. I think the interesting part where people forget about is due process. There was due process within the Obama administration to go through these immigration courts and all the things that they needed to go through. And I think that we forget that. And when we have these conversations with our members, due process is one of the most important things within our contracts, right? You got to have progressive steps of discipline. I still have my due process rights under the grievance procedure. I can go to arbitration. These are things that I hold near and dear as a Teamster. And those are things that we're taking away from people when they had due process. And it's something that we look at as Americans, that we hold on to our due process. And that's something that people are not given. They're just being scooped up because of the way they look. But it's not all doom and gloom. You know, one of the things is rising together, what we talked about in the beginning. And how do we rise together? I think, one, by being on, you know, platforms like this, the work that the HRDC is doing, take considerable pride in even within our local, educating our members on what they need to do. And we're seeing so many members coming up and saying, hey, look, this is what I'm doing on my shop floor. This is what I'm doing at my local union. This is what I'm doing in my community, because an injury to one is an injury to all. And you're starting to see a rise within the labor movement into social justice movements. And when you merge the two together, because the community are workers and that's who we represent. And whether they're part of our union or not, or maybe a different union, or maybe they're non-union, I think the importance of the injury to one and injury to all is, especially if they're non-union, even if their kids are involved in coming to the local and getting some type of education in regards to this immigration situation that's happening, they look back and they say, hey, I remember the Teamsters educating my parents. I remember the Teamsters providing this training for our community. And with that, one, they obviously hold the organization in a higher light, but maybe where they organize their workplace, when they grow up, wherever they decide to, whatever path they choose to go, they decide, hey, you know what? The labor movement is the way to go. We got to protect it. Even if they're not part of it, maybe they go on to college, maybe they get a scholarship through the IBT, or whatever the situation is, that those young individuals move on to know that when they see that Teamster logo, that represents power, education, strength, unity, and what we've been saying since, you know, the beginning of time. It's an old labor chant: an injury to one is an injury to all. So knowing that, putting all that together, and just, if it sparks one individual, that's all that matters. That's the work behind it. That's the work that's being done here. If it educates and inspires and motivates people to get out there and do something, what the work that's being done in regards to educating people, the education piece of our organization, the education piece we do within the community, we'll never see the results of that because it's generational. And that's okay, because as long as it sparks a community and individuals to do the right thing by working people, then we did what we had to do as leaders within our great organization.
I think using the union, your union platform to protect migrant workers, you have policies in place. If you don't have them already in contract negotiations, carve out a section for them, right? Protections, as simple as, you know, getting ahead of the I-9 audits or the immigration audits, you know, here in the state of California, we have 3 days advance notice. The employer has to notify the union. That gives us enough time to go talk to our members, let them know that there's one coming in place. Giving a break time or training time so we can educate our members on immigration policies and what their rights are if ICE does knock on the door. Structured training times, protection for workplace enforcements. What else do we have here?
Okay.
Yeah, the next one.
Yeah, so as Abe was saying, know your rights. In the workplace, number one, we want to make sure that at absolute minimum, that the front line is educated and knows what to do in the event that there's an ICE raid or an ICE agent comes through that door. First and foremost, want to make sure that wherever you're at in your workplace, that there are designated private areas, and it is very clear what the public area is. For example, a lobby is obviously a public area, but behind certain doors, we want to make sure that those doors have privacy signs. For example, no staff only beyond this point, or privacy beyond this point. Anything like that, that would help basically outline which areas are public and which area are only should be accessed by staff. Number two is if an agent comes in and says, I need access to the building, I need access to this person, I'm looking for this person. Unless they have a warrant that is signed by a judge, they do not have the right to enter any area. So it is important for that front line staff to understand what that difference is. And there are resources that we have. We are going to be rolling out and available. We'll have it on our locals website, and we're actually working on something, one of our websites as well, to have that available for everybody. But you can find this pretty much anywhere online as well. But get familiar with what a judicial warrant looks like versus a normal warrant, a regular warrant that's signed by maybe the sheriff or any other law enforcement agency. Sorry?
The ICE warrant.
No.
Yeah, the ICE warrants. Something that we did really great here, when we talk to our employers, is we have designee persons, right? So when ICE comes in to serve a warrant, they have to serve it to a designee, and it's not going to be the front desk. It has to go to the employer's lawyer, and then they have to give a request. That buys us more time. And that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for that time. If there is a raid and they don't give us the 3 days, they have to give it to the designee. The designee is going to notify the union. The union can go down there, and we can advocate for our members. Sorry.
That's great. Also, if you're undocumented yourself, you want to make sure that you protect yourself and have a plan in place. Talk to your family of what that would look like. And we understand that these are very difficult conversations to have, but these are conversations that need to be had, especially with your children. You want to make sure that you have a designated plan of who's going to pick up your children if, God forbid, you cannot, if you've been picked up. As union members, we need to also provide resources or comfort or a safe haven for these members as well. For example, if somebody goes missing or if somebody doesn't report to work, every union member, especially staff members, need to know where to go to find out if somebody has been detained, and we'll have that available for everybody as well. But there is a website that you can go and you can find if somebody has been detained. going back to if you are an undocumented person, or even a DACA person, or anybody who's not of, what they consider a legal status here, you, again, want to have that plan. Talk to not only your family, but talk to an attorney. Do that all ahead of time, so you're not already behind if, God forbid, you get detained. We do have rights. Everybody has rights. Even if you are undocumented, you have rights, but the reality is that right now they just don't care. So we have to just try to stay as educated and on top of the laws as they constantly change, and just stay strong with whatever we can do, such as educating our office staff.
The thing that we can do now, and not to be doom and gloom, right? I mean, we've gone through this. This is their playbook, and what's going forward is already written out in Project 2025, where the next steps are already there. We already know what the next steps are. What we can do is start educating our members, start educating ourselves. Starts with you. Host trainings in the shop floor. Let your members know what their rights are. Let them know what their rights are at home. Have them teach their community and their neighbors. Have the right to record while you're there. You have all these excellent rights that you can exercise, and every single time that this has happened, there has been community that has come together to push back. So what we need to do back is just continue to push back and continue to educate, as Carlos mentioned earlier. Here you see various pictures. We pride ourselves at 1932 as teaching our history. We have movies like Walkout, what got us our fundamental rights in high school to go to college. We go to high schools and we teach, we educate, we partner up with this great organization called TODEC here in California, that we provide community resource and trainings on. And we get behind whatever laws that we can to push for these rights to exist for our communities. And again, these rights aren't, let's take away the immigrant right behind it, or the the bad phrases that they call us. It's really just human dignity. No kid deserves to watch the window be smashed out of their parents' car and then forcibly removed, or be left at school waiting to be picked up. And not knowing what's going to happen next, and teachers have to wait an extra time. Teachers are out there fighting it. Our Teamsters are out there fighting right now, and that's what we're doing, right? We're mobilizing our members, and we're going to these events. We're out there, we're walking the walk, and we're talking the talk. We're educating. And for us, what we want to see from this group as well, and we'll touch a little bit at the end of it, is we're working on a history project, and we're living in a big part of history. So for our members on this call, or our members that watch it later, we want you to send over these videos so we can collect them. Show us the demonstrations that you're at. Show us the signs that you're making. Because when I go back and I Google Teamsters and immigration fights, our pictures aren't really up there, but we're going to make it loud and known that we're out there. We're out there now. You can see us right here at the Chicano Moratorium, and this was a big event that our team went out to.
Another thing I actually wanted to add to, in regards to community, there are local rapid response systems that are already in place. Abe mentioned that we partner up with TODEC, which is just an amazing group that's out in the Coachella Valley. And we were out there the other day in training, and they talked about what was supposed to be one of the largest ice raids in the Coachella Valley in history, that it was supposed to go down. And they had tents set up everywhere. There's ice vehicles everywhere. It was just going to be massive. Because this area had already set up a rapid response team, they actually have a call center. They have people available 24/7, and they get notified of any kind of ICE actions anywhere. Hey, there's one at the market. Hey, there's one here. So as soon as they started setting up tents, they got notification, and that notification went out not only to the residents in the area, it went out to the owners of the farms, and they said, make sure you send all your undocumented people home, close your gates. make sure all your paperwork is ready. They also linked up to the schools. They created such a tight network. They linked up to the schools and let them know, hey, let the kids know what's going on. Their parents might not be there. Keep the kids longer, provide a safe space, contact the parents of these kids, let them know that this is going on. So the information spread so quickly that what was supposed to be the largest ICE raid actually ended up being the most unsuccessful ICE raid in that area. So these systems work. As doom and gloom as some of our slides were, some of the presentation was, these systems are still working, and we have to continue to communicate, to fight, to be out there and utilize every single form of communication that we have, no matter what, because they can't silence it.
And, you know, when we sit down and we talk to different organizations, one of the biggest concerns that are out there, being involved, is just being there for your community or for the kids. What the schools are starting to see is a lot of the kids aren't reporting to school because they don't want to be followed home, right? So this is, again, they're creating the same, just recreating their history, right? And it's up to us to pick it up where we see the holes and fill that history, because now the kids aren't going to school, they're not getting the same education that they should be, that everybody else is. So they're going to fall further behind. That means when they grow up and they go to jobs, it's going to be, you know, more poverty jobs, because they don't have the education or the resources to be at a 4-year college, or the knowledge to go somewhere further. But now the kids are also going to the farms to work. They're going out and they're selling the tamales on the side of the road
Because their parents can.
They're legal,
Right.
you know, but my mom's not, so I'm not gonna go to school today, but my mom made the batch of tamales, so I'm gonna go out to the Home Depot and I'm gonna sell them. So you go out to the Home Depot, you'll see a kid out there now selling tamales. You'll see the kids out there selling the hot dogs. And that's because they have to skip school to, and this is reference California. I know
Right.
every other state's different, but now we're seeing that over here in our communities. And it's important for us to try to provide a resource for these kids and a safe haven for these kids as well. So wherever you can partner with, make sure you do that. We are the ones that are writing our history. We're the ones that are on the right side of the law. We're here to protect human rights. And it's impactful to me. I'm first gen here. My mom was a migrant worker. My grandfather would tell me stories about how many times, because he would organize his farm. Every time he would organize, they would boot him out. He would cross the border right back over and organize another farm. Ended up organizing Earl Scheib. But he would be like, oh, well, I guess we're getting kicked out again. I'll see you guys in a week. You know, that, you know, he laughs about it now, but the uncertainty that my family had, living on a farm, not knowing where the next meal was going to be or the next bill was going to come from, right? Or how they were going to pay is something that I'm glad I didn't have to face as a kid. And I'm going to make sure my kids don't face that as a kid, but it's not right for any kid to face.
I just kind of want to, you know, kind of end it on, you know, we started off with why are we here? Remembering, reflecting, and rising together. So we're remembering some of this dark history. And as Abe was talking right now, we're kind of reflecting stories of our own childhood and our own experiences. And I think Anabel wrapped it up when she talked about the rising together part, about when she talked about having a plan in place and that being very important. Because that's us rising together, educating our members to say, hey, if this happens, you need to have a plan in place. Who's going to pick your kids up from school? Contact your union, contact your shop steward. If you go missing, that they can contact the employer to possibly save your job. Because we look at our contracts and we're like 3 days, no call, no show. But what does that mean? That wasn't the intent of the language to put in there. Wasn't meant for this type of situation. But that way, our representatives, our shop stewards can get on top of that, and they can create these on their own shop floor, these programs, and educate members on what they need to do. And that's part of the rising together. And if you kind of go back to that photo, if Anabel, if you could, where we're at the Chicano Moratorium. And I want to highlight that for this specific reason, is because I think that we try to separate what happens within society and where we're at as a union. But respect our existence or expect our resistance. Like that rings so true in every aspect of who we are as Teamsters. Because our employers are companies, are people, counties or agencies that we represent. They would rather just not have us there. They don't want us representing members and asking for better benefits, right? And in some cases, when we're organizing new members, we deal with the, you know, there's a resistance there. But like we tell them, whether it's a contract, whether it's an organizing drive, we're yelling at from the top of our lungs that same slogan: respect our existence or expect our resistance, whether it's members or members of our union or members within the community and societies that we live in. That's what rings true. So all we want is dignity and respect on the job, right? And if you don't give us that, we're going to give you resistance. And for everybody on this call, we know when you show up to any strike line, even if it's not ours, and you got your Teamster jacket on it, it puts the fear of God in them. And that's what we need to do today as a society, is let them know if they don't respect our existence as people, they're not respecting our existence as Teamsters. And they can expect our resistance in that. So I just wanted to add that at the end.
Thank you guys so much. I mean, we want to open up, we got time for questions.
Hi, this is Anthony Rosa. You guys always do such a beautiful job. You know, it's sad. I don't really watch TV with what this president has done. And just, you know, every time I listen to a piece on the news in my car when I'm driving, it breaks my heart what he's doing to our people. It really does. And it shows more and more how racist he brings out people to be against us. You know, I was thinking back the other day driving in my car. You know, my grandmother came from Puerto Rico, but when she came here, the work that they had was factory work. And if she was alive today to see what's going on, it's so saddening and disheartening, the way they treat us. But meanwhile, they forget about that we fought in wars. You know, they needed us for that. They needed us to pick the fields, like you said. They needed us to do all this work. And then when the soldiers come back, then they get rid of us. You know, I went to DC last week on business, and it was so disheartening to see the military out there. And it broke my heart. You know, it's supposed to be the capital. You're supposed to be happy to go to the capital. And I haven't been happy to go to the capital in a long time, a long time. And it just breaks my heart that, you know, people say, well, it really doesn't matter to me. It's happening to someone else. And like you guys said, we still have to protect our people. We still have to educate, you know. And one last thing, you know, the other day, you know, I go to Home Depot a lot, and you used to find a lot of our people there, a lot of Latinos, they're looking for work. They're no longer there, you know, where I'm at, because they got the police sitting right outside. And this is what we've come to. This is what the future of our children are going to have to go through. You know, it's going to take 3 terms of presidency, 12 years, to at least repair all the heartache and the disruption that he has done. That's my personal feeling. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Anthony. Want to share something that happened a couple weeks ago. We had a booth, and we were going over kind of what I just did on the Know Your Rights and how to get your workplace kind of ready, and you know what they need to do and what they need to say, but most importantly what they shouldn't say. So it's going through my spiel, and I was on a roll, right? I was feeling good and passing these flyers out. There's a lot of high school kids that came up and said, well, what does this mean? And I had all these opportunities to talk to these young kids, and this one, I engaged in such a much longer conversation, and we got into the recent Supreme Court ruling, how racial profiling is legal now and what that means. And this I want to say she was probably 15. She had no idea what that meant. And that was an opportunity for me to talk to her and tell her. And right as I was on a roll and I was feeling good, and everybody was being so receptive and just so supportive, and some people came up with such emotional stories too. And comes this lady, takes our candy, and she's kind of reading one of the flyers I had out, and I got to her and I said, let me tell you what this is about. And I was excited to tell her my spiel. And she said, stop. I'm American. This doesn't matter to me. This is not my problem. I'm American. And she walked away. That was hard. But just as you're saying, all these things that are happening and these disheartening things that are right in front of us, it's hard not to let that get to us. But I had to shake it off. And I thought, okay, that's one person. I just talked to all these other people. I talked to a bunch of kids and I told them what was going on. That's what matters. And that's also a long-term effect that we're going to be looking at later on, where these kids, if we continue to talk to these kids and go to these schools, we're raising activists right there. We're building them to make that change. Because even though we are going to have these negative effects that we already know what's happening, just like Abe said, these kids are now having to step up and fill their parents' roles and bring money to the table, or bring food to the table and bring money back to the homes by selling, corn, or selling whatever it is that they could do. And they're filling these adult roles and they're leaving their child behind. We got to do something about that. And even if it means talking to 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, or just on a daily, at least one person, that also has a long-term effect for the good.
Good morning, 1932. This is Nicole Moreno. I just want to say thank you guys, because you're always pumping that education. Keep it going. Keep us enlightened on what's going on. You guys do an amazing job each and every time. It was a great presentation. It's perfect for Hispanic Heritage Month. And so I just want to say thank you for the educational piece. And this isn't just here in California, this is going across the United States. So this is awesome. Keep up the great work. And hopefully more of us get involved to try to help in any way that we can as well. So just a big thank you, and keep up the great work, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole.
For that. You're always supporting. Thank you so much. We got a question on the chat. Somebody had said, how do I start a chapter of the Hispanic Caucus in New Mexico? Super easy. Just do it. Just talk to people, get it out, get these flyers, share the flyers. If you see things on our Instagram or on any of our social media pages, screenshot, send it out, copy it. Whatever it is, copy the logo, copy whatever we're doing, and just get it out. It's just get a bunch of people that are wanting to make a change and just do it. There's no science to it. We started our Hispanic caucus, but it was just a few of us that said, hey, you know what? We should do something. We should get together and talk about the history, talk about stuff that's not in the books. And that's just like, okay, that it came from one conversation. Carlos actually is the one that got it all together. And now here we are. So again, no science to it, just do it.
Also reach out to the National Hispanic Caucus. They'll probably have a
Yeah.
roadmap ready for you as well.
Absolutely.
Again, thank you to Anthony Rosa, HRDC, for putting this on and allowing us to be a part of it. We appreciate you, brother. We love you. You know that.
Yep.
Oh, I love you guys more. I mean, you guys you're a super breath of fresh air. I just can't, I talk about you guys all the time, you know, I and I get sentimental when I talk about you guys, because you guys have stride so far in the things you have done. And I need you to give me as much history as you can, so we can put it in that building of ours. It's our building. And Anabel said something, very emotional. She says, you know, the woman says it's not our fight, it's not her fight. You know, I hear this shit all the time from people, you know, all the time. And we just got to keep fighting. You know, the things you guys do is amazing, you know, and we just got to keep on fighting. And it's a group like you guys. I love 1932. I love Randy Corrigan, that you guys always step up and do as much as you can to educate people. And I love you guys for it.
So
Thank
much.
you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So yeah, thank you all for joining us and giving this amazing presentation. And I would remind everybody that this is why the story and the facts here are unique to the Hispanic Latino people. It is not a unique story. This is a playbook that people have used time and time again. There's always an us and an them, and anytime um, they allow us to create a us and them, it allows them to divide us and to sow unrest, and allows them to give them power. And one of the things that I find very encouraging and that I'm very enthusiastic about is the fact that, during the Bracero programs, the Teamsters were not on the right side of it, right? We didn't have these strong voices speaking out. We made a lot of mistakes in our history around this, but now we have people that, like you, that are in fact raising their voice, that are educating around it, and that is night and day from where we were when this all first started going on. So again, thank you for what you do. It's so important, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you for that, Paul. I do want to mention that there were people on the right side. And that's really what got us going behind a lot of the work that we were doing. One of them was when we sat down with Dolores Huerta, and we were like, we're on the wrong side publicly, but there were Teamsters on the right side fighting to even that out. And then those are the
Absolutely.
that we wanted to touch on too, right? But like you said, this isn't something new. Project 2025 has their immigration platform laid out. What's next? Next is it's going to be one massive, federal agency to take over all. They're planning on just going ahead and getting rid of DHS altogether and just having one federal force. But as long as we choose humanity, as long as we choose not to scapegoat, as long as we choose not to be complicit, we'll have our courage and solidarity to lead us the way. I just want to make sure that, there are people on the right side of that. There are a lot of people on the right side of that. So we want to take those stories and highlight them. Very important. If you guys can get them over to Anabel. Any pictures that you guys can have that you guys are at these rallies, at these events, we want to document those pictures. We want to show that we were on the right side. She's gonna go ahead and enter her email in the chat. So if you have any of those pictures of you guys out there, make sure so we can get those, like Anthony said, get those into our hall and our archives.
Thank you guys so much. Have a good
Appreciate
rest
you
of the
all.
weekend.